The evening shift at the McDonald's on Pine Street was usually quiet, but for Shaquille "Big Shaq" Thompson, that Tuesday night would change his life forever. Standing at 6 feet 5 inches with gentle eyes and a warm smile that put everyone at ease, Big Shaq had been working the drive-through window for the past 3 years while pursuing his degree in social work. The clock had just struck 8:45 p.m. when a black SUV pulled up to the window. At first glance, nothing seemed out of the ordinary, just another customer picking up a late dinner. But as Big Shaq leaned out to hand over the order, his trained eye caught something unusual in the back seat. A small girl, no more than 5 years old, was sitting there, her eyes wide with fear. What caught his attention wasn't just her expression, it was the way she deliberately held up her tiny hands, forming shapes that Big Shaq recognized from his volunteer work at the local community center. The little girl was using sign language. "Help me," her small hands spelled out, followed by a barely audible whisper that sent chills down his spine. The driver, a well-dressed man in his 40s, seemed agitated, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel and constantly checking his rearview mirror. The woman in the passenger seat kept her face turned away, but Big Shaq noticed her shoulders trembling slightly. Years of working with at-risk youth had taught Big Shaq to trust his instincts. Something wasn't right. He maintained his casual demeanor, making small talk as he pretended to check their order one last time. His mind raced through the proper protocols he'd learned during a recent community safety workshop. "Sir, I apologize, but it seems there's a small issue with your order," Big Shaq said smoothly, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Would you mind pulling up to the waiting area? We'll bring it right out to you." As the SUV moved forward, Big Shaq signaled to his coworker, May, to take over the window. With trembling fingers but a clear mind, he stepped into the break room and dialed 911. The dispatcher's voice came through, calm and professional. "911, what's your emergency?" Big Shaq spoke quietly but clearly, years of handling difficult situations helping him maintain his composure. He described the scene, the little girl's sign language plea, and the suspicious behavior of the adults. The dispatcher assured him help was on the way. Those next 7 minutes felt like an eternity. Big Shaq kept watching through the restaurant's windows, his heart pounding every time the SUV's engine revved. He noticed how the man kept checking his mirrors, his movements becoming increasingly erratic. The local police station was only 3 blocks away, but Big Shaq knew that in situations like these, every second counted. He remembered the statistics from his social work classes: the first few hours are crucial in cases of child endangerment. What surprised him most was how ordinary everything looked from the outside. Customers came and went, the kitchen staff prepared orders, and the world kept turning. Yet in that black SUV, a small girl's fate hung in the balance, her brave decision to reach out possibly changing the course of her life. 2 police cruisers pulled into the parking lot silently, their lights off to avoid alerting the suspects. The officers approached the SUV from different angles, their movements precise and practiced. Big Shaq watched from inside, his hands clasped together, whispering a quiet prayer. What happened next unfolded like a scene from a movie, but this was terrifyingly real. The officers surrounded the vehicle, their commands clear and firm. The man tried to restart the engine, but it was too late. Within moments, both adults were in custody, and a female officer was gently helping the little girl out of the back seat. Later that night, as Big Shaq gave his statement to the police, he learned the truth. The little girl had been reported missing from a neighboring state just hours earlier. The man and woman were not her parents but part of a trafficking network that law enforcement had been tracking for months. The girl's knowledge of sign language had been taught to her by her real mother, a teacher for the deaf, who had always emphasized the importance of being able to communicate in different ways. This simple skill, combined with her extraordinary courage and Big Shaq's attention to detail, had prevented an unthinkable tragedy. As Big Shaq finished his shift that night, the weight of what had transpired finally hit him. His hands shook as he hung up his work apron, and tears welled up in his eyes. His supervisor insisted he take the next day off, but Big Shaq knew he would be back. His job wasn't just about serving food, it was about being present, being aware, and being ready to help when someone needed it most. The incident made the local news, though Big Shaq's name was kept private at his request. He didn't want recognition, he wanted change. In the weeks that followed, he worked with local authorities to develop a training program for fast food workers, teaching them to recognize signs of distress and how to respond appropriately. When asked why he noticed the girls' signs when others might have missed them, Big Shaq's response was simple: sometimes the smallest voices need us to listen the hardest. We're not just serving food, we're serving our community. And in our community, every child matters. The days following the incident at McDonald's transformed Big Shaq's quiet life in ways he never expected. His phone buzzed constantly with messages from concerned family members who'd recognized the story on the local news, despite his name being withheld. His younger sister, a social media manager, warned him that videos of the police operation at McDonald's were already circulating online. The little girl, whose name was kept confidential for her protection, had been safely reunited with her family. Big Shaq learned this through Detective Chen, who'd been assigned to the case. The detective visited the McDonald's 3 days after the incident, not for another statement, but to share something special. Her mother wanted you to see this, Detective Chen said, holding up a handmade card. Inside was a drawing of a stick figure wearing what looked like a McDonald's uniform, surrounded by wobbly hearts. At the bottom, in careful child's handwriting, were the words, "Thank you for seeing me." Big Shaq had to excuse himself to the break room after reading it. His co-workers pretended not to notice when he emerged with red-rimmed eyes a few minutes later. The incident sparked a movement within the fast food community. Restaurant managers from across the city reached out, asking about the training program Big Shaq had mentioned to the police. What started as a simple suggestion evolved into weekly workshops held in the community center where he volunteered. During these sessions, Big Shaq would share his experience, but more importantly, he listened to others. A Burger King employee described helping a teenage runaway. A coffee shop barista talked about recognizing signs of domestic abuse in a regular customer. Their stories proved that fast food workers weren't just serving meals, they were unofficial guardians of their communities. The pressure to speak publicly grew, especially after a national news network picked up the story. Big Shaq declined most interviews, but he agreed to participate in a community safety awareness campaign. "I'm not comfortable being called a hero," he explained to his supervisor. "I just want to help make sure other workers know what to look for." His social work professors took notice too. Dr. Rodriguez, his advisor, helped him develop his experience into a case study for his final thesis. "Sometimes the best research comes from real-life experience," she told him, watching him organize his notes. "Your incident highlights the intersection of community service and public safety." 1 month after the incident, Big Shaq received an unexpected visitor during his shift. Officer Patel, one of the responding officers from that night, stopped by with news. The case had led to the discovery of a larger trafficking network, and several more children had been rescued as a result. "Your action that night created a domino effect," Officer Patel explained, sipping her coffee. "The people we arrested started talking, giving us leads. Sometimes all it takes is one person paying attention to unravel something much bigger." The impact rippled through the community in other ways too. Local businesses began installing better lighting in their parking lots. The city council approved funding for additional security cameras in high-risk areas. Small changes, but meaningful ones. Big Shaq's younger co-workers started coming to him for advice, not just about handling difficult customers, but about life in general. May, who'd covered his window that crucial night, decided to pursue a degree in criminal justice. "You showed me that we can make a real difference," she told him during a quiet moment between orders. The training program evolved to include role-playing scenarios and guest speakers from law enforcement and social services. Big Shaq made sure to emphasize that heroism wasn't about dramatic rescues, it was about being consistently aware and willing to act. The most important thing, he would tell participants, is to trust your instincts while staying safe. We're not asked to be superheroes. We're asked to be responsible members of our community. His own family dynamics shifted too. His mother, who'd always worried about him working late shifts in fast food while studying, now spoke proudly of her son's work. His father, a man of few words, started wearing a McDonald's cap around the house, his own quiet way of showing support. The regular customers changed as well. Some would share their own stories of times they wished they'd spoken up about something suspicious. Others just thanked him for being there, for paying attention. The drive-through window became a sort of confession booth, where people felt safe sharing their concerns about things they'd seen in the community. One evening, as Big Shaq was closing up, he found a small package left for him. Inside was a handmade bracelet and a note from a local Girl Scout troop. They'd earned their safety badges by learning about his story and wanted him to know he'd inspired them to be more observant in their own neighborhoods. The weight of responsibility sometimes felt overwhelming. There were nights when Big Shaq would lie awake, wondering about other children he might have missed before that evening. But then he'd remember the little girl's brave hands spelling out, "Help me," and he'd find strength in knowing that being present and aware really could change lives. His story became part of the official training manual for new employees, not just at McDonald's but at several fast food chains across the state. The manual emphasized that every position, from the drive-through window to the kitchen, was a potential opportunity to make a difference in someone's life. The real hero of this story, Big Shaq would insist during training sessions, was that little girl. She was brave enough to reach out, and all I had to do was be present enough to notice. Sometimes that's all it takes, just being present and willing to help. 6 months after the incident, Big Shaq's life had found a new rhythm. His social work degree was nearly complete, and his training program had expanded to neighboring cities. But it was a chance encounter at the grocery store that showed him the true ripple effects of that fateful night. He was picking up supplies for the weekend when he noticed a woman studying him intently from across the produce section. She approached slowly, pushing a shopping cart with a sleeping toddler inside. "You probably don't remember me," she said softly, "but I was there that night at McDonald's. I was in the car behind the SUV." Big Shaq remembered her, the woman in the red sedan who'd waited patiently, unaware of the drama unfolding ahead. She introduced herself as Mrs. Lee, a kindergarten teacher at a local elementary school. She explained how witnessing the incident had changed her perspective on her role as an educator. "I went back to school for special education certification," she told him, adjusting her sleeping child's blanket. "Now I teach sign language to all my students, not just those who need it for communication. We never know when these skills might save a life." Her story was just one of many that found their way back to Big Shaq. The local community college had introduced a new course on community safety awareness, and they'd invited him to be a guest speaker. At first, the idea of speaking to college students terrified him, but he remembered the courage of that little girl and found his own. During his first lecture, a student raised her hand and shared how she'd helped prevent a potential abduction at a park just by being observant and knowing when to call authorities. "I remembered reading about what you did," she explained, "and it gave me the confidence to trust my instincts." The drive-through window at McDonald's had become something of a local landmark. Parents would point it out to their children, using it as a teaching moment about safety and awareness. Big Shaq's co-workers joked that he should charge admission, but he knew the real value wasn't in the story itself, it was in the lessons people took from it. One rainy Tuesday afternoon, Detective Chen returned with unexpected news. The case had led to an international breakthrough, connecting dots that law enforcement had been trying to link for years. The little girl's brave action and Big Shaq's response had helped uncover a network that stretched across 3 continents. Sometimes the biggest cases break because of small moments of awareness, Detective Chen explained, sharing a cup of coffee with Big Shaq during his break. Your action that night was like dropping a pebble in a pond, the ripples just keep going. The impact reached beyond law enforcement. Local businesses started implementing what they called the Big Shaq Protocol, a system of subtle signals their employees could use to alert colleagues about potentially dangerous situations. A nail salon owner shared how her staff had helped a teenage trafficking victim using these protocols. Big Shaq social work professors used his experience to develop a new curriculum module about community intervention. They emphasized how everyday people in service positions could be the first line of defense against crime. The module included real-world scenarios and practical strategies for intervention without putting oneself at risk. His youngest sister, still managing social media accounts, showed him how the story had inspired a trend of community guardian posts online. People shared their own stories of helping others in small but significant ways. The hashtag #BePresent had gone viral, encouraging everyone to be more aware of their surroundings. The training sessions at the community center had evolved into a full-fledged program, complete with certificates and professional development credits. Fast food workers, retail employees, and service industry staff from all over the state came to learn. Big Shaq made sure every session included a segment on sign language basics. You never know which skill might be the one that saves a life, he would tell participants. The key is to be prepared and stay alert without becoming paranoid. We're not looking for trouble, we're creating safe spaces in our community. His own career plans shifted too. While finishing his social work degree, Big Shaq started developing a comprehensive safety training program specifically for service industry workers. He collaborated with law enforcement, child protection services, and domestic violence experts to create something that could be implemented nationwide. The local school district invited him to speak at their staff development day. Teachers and administrators learned about the importance of teaching children multiple ways to ask for help. One school even started a program teaching basic sign language alongside stranger danger awareness. Big Shaq kept working his regular shifts at McDonald's, despite offers for other positions. This window is where it all started, he would say when asked why he stayed. Every person who comes through is a reminder that we all have the power to make a difference. His regular customers became part of the safety network too. Truck drivers would report suspicious vehicles they'd seen on their routes. Late-night taxi drivers shared information about areas where children might be at risk. The drive-through window had become an unofficial community watch hub. 1 year after the incident, the city council presented Big Shaq with a Community Guardian Award. During his acceptance speech, he shared the spotlight with other service workers who'd made similar interventions. "We're all guardians," he told the audience. "Every one of us has the potential to change a life just by paying attention." The story continued to evolve, but Big Shaq remained grounded. He still remembered the fear in that little girl's eyes, the trembling of her small hands as she signed for help. That memory drove him to keep improving the training program, to keep sharing the message that sometimes the biggest impacts come from the smallest moments of awareness. The real change, he often reflected during quiet moments at the drive-through window, happens when we stop seeing ourselves as bystanders and start recognizing our role as protectors of our community. Every interaction is an opportunity to make a difference. 18 months after that life-changing night at the drive-through window, Big Shaq found himself standing in front of a mirror, adjusting his tie. He'd been invited to speak at a national conference on community safety, and despite all his experience with the training program, butterflies still danced in his stomach. The conference center was packed with law enforcement officials, social workers, and community leaders from across the country. As Big Shaq waited backstage, he thought about how far things had come from that single moment of awareness at a fast food window. During his speech, he shared something he'd never told anyone before. "That night, I almost didn't say anything," he admitted to the hushed audience. For a split second, I wondered if I was overreacting. But then I remembered something my grandmother always said, better to feel foolish for a moment than to regret silence forever. His honesty struck a chord. During the Q&A session, people lined up to share similar moments of hesitation from their own lives. A bus driver described spotting a lost child but almost driving past. A hotel receptionist talked about nearly ignoring suspicious behavior that turned out to be a domestic violence situation. Back at McDonald's, Big Shaq's co-workers had taken the initiative to create their own safety innovations. They'd developed a color-coded cup system to subtly alert each other about potentially dangerous situations. Green stickers meant watch carefully, yellow meant call a manager, and red meant immediate police intervention needed. The system proved its worth when a young worker named Jean noticed something odd about a late-night customer. Using the cup system, she alerted her teammates, leading to the prevention of a potential robbery. When interviewed by police, Jean said, "I just thought about what Big Shaq always says, trust your instincts." The impact reached beyond American borders. A Canadian fast food chain adopted the training program, translating it into French and English. Big Shaq received messages from workers in Mexico, Brazil, and even Japan, asking for advice on implementing similar systems in their communities. One particular story touched him deeply. A small-town diner waitress in Idaho had recognized the signs of elder abuse thanks to the training program she'd watched online. Her intervention had saved an elderly man from his abusive caregiver. She sent Big Shaq a letter saying, "Your story gave me the courage to trust my gut." The little girl from that night, now approaching 7 years old, had become an advocate in her own way. While her identity remained protected, her mother shared updates through Detective Chen. She'd started a children's safety club at her school, teaching other kids the importance of knowing multiple ways to ask for help. Big Shaq's personal life transformed too. He'd completed his social work degree and received job offers from prestigious organizations. But he chose to stay in his community, dividing his time between McDonald's, the training program, and a new role as a youth counselor at the local YMCA. Success isn't about moving up and out, he explained to a reporter doing a follow-up story. It's about growing where you're planted and helping others grow too. The drive-through window became a symbol of hope in the community. People would sometimes pull up just to share their concerns about situations they'd witnessed. Big Shaq and his team developed a resource guide to help direct these Good Samaritans to the right authorities and support services. His sister's social media campaign #BePresent had evolved into a full-fledged movement. People shared stories of intervention and awareness daily. A tech company even developed a free app inspired by the campaign, helping people locate and contact emergency services quickly while providing safety tips and resources. The training program continued to evolve based on real-world feedback. Big Shaq incorporated suggestions from participants, adding modules on cultural sensitivity and trauma-informed response. He emphasized that being aware didn't mean being suspicious of everyone, it meant being present and compassionate. Local schools started inviting him to career days, where he'd talk about the importance of service industry jobs. Every position that puts you in contact with the public is an opportunity to make a difference, he'd tell the students. There are no small jobs when it comes to community safety. The incident had also sparked academic interest. Researchers from a nearby university conducted a study on the impact of community awareness training in preventing crimes. They found that areas with trained service workers showed significant decreases in various types of exploitation and abuse. Big Shaq's grandmother, whose wisdom had guided him that crucial night, became a regular at the training sessions. She'd sit in the back, crocheting and occasionally offering pieces of folk wisdom that perfectly supplemented the formal training. Her presence reminded everyone that community safety was a family affair. During a quiet moment at work, Big Shaq received an unexpected visit from Officer Patel. She'd been promoted to sergeant and was implementing a new community policing program. "Your story changed how we approach community partnerships," she told him. "We're now training officers to view every service worker as a potential ally in keeping our communities safe." The ripple effects continued to surprise him. A children's book author created a series about a gentle giant who worked at a restaurant and helped keep his community safe. While the character wasn't officially based on Big Shaq, everyone knew the inspiration. The books taught children about safety without causing fear. As his influence grew, Big Shaq remained humble. He still worked the same drive-through window several shifts a week, still greeted every customer with genuine warmth, and still approached each interaction as an opportunity to make a difference. "The real heroes," he would say in his training sessions, "are the people who choose to be aware every day, who choose to care even when it's inconvenient, who choose to act even when it's scary. We're all just ordinary people who sometimes get the chance to do extraordinary things." 2 years after the incident, Big Shaq found himself facing an unexpected challenge. A major restaurant chain had offered him a corporate position to implement his training program nationwide. The salary was impressive, and the potential impact was huge, but accepting meant leaving his beloved drive-through window and the community he'd grown to cherish. During a late-night shift, while contemplating the offer, he received a visit from someone he hadn't expected. Detective Chen pulled up to the window, but this time she wasn't alone. In the passenger seat sat a woman he'd never met but instantly recognized from the photos he'd seen, the little girl's mother. "She insisted on meeting you," Detective Chen explained. "We were careful to make sure no press would be around." The woman's eyes were filled with tears as she spoke. "My daughter starts every morning by practicing her sign language in the mirror," she said. "She says she's training to be ready, just in case another child needs her help someday. You didn't just save her that night, you helped her find her purpose." That conversation became a turning point for Big Shaq. He realized that sometimes the biggest impact comes from staying rooted in your community rather than chasing larger platforms. He politely declined the corporate position, instead focusing on making his local program as strong as possible. His decision led to something unexpected. Other communities began developing their own versions of the program, adapting it to their specific needs while maintaining the core principles. Big Shaq provided guidance remotely, sharing resources and experience without leaving his post at the drive-through window. The McDonald's where it all happened had become something of a living classroom. New employees from other locations would request transfers there specifically to learn from Big Shaq and his team. They called it the Guardians Academy, though Big Shaq always chuckled at the grand title. One quiet afternoon, a teenage boy approached the counter inside the restaurant. He seemed nervous, shifting from foot to foot as he asked to speak with Big Shaq. When they sat down at a corner table, the boy revealed that he'd been in a similar situation as the little girl, but he hadn't known how to ask for help. He'd escaped eventually, but the memory of feeling voiceless haunted him. "I want to learn how to help others like me," the boy said. "How do I start?" That conversation sparked a new initiative. Big Shaq worked with local youth organizations to create a peer support program. Teenagers who had survived difficult situations learned to become advocates for others, sharing their stories and teaching safety strategies to their peers. The program caught the attention of a documentary filmmaker who wanted to tell the story of how one moment of awareness had transformed an entire community. Big Shaq agreed to participate on one condition: that the focus would be on the ripple effects rather than on him personally. The resulting film, titled Present and Aware, captured stories from across the country of service workers who'd made a difference in their communities. It showed how the simple act of paying attention had prevented countless tragedies and helped vulnerable people find safety. During the local premiere, Big Shaq sat in the back row, watching as his community saw themselves reflected on the screen. The film showed late-night gas station attendants helping runaways find shelter, bus drivers ensuring elderly passengers weren't being exploited, and hotel workers identifying signs of human trafficking. The training program continued to evolve, incorporating lessons learned from each new situation. Big Shaq worked with psychologists to add modules on managing the emotional impact of intervention. Being a guardian doesn't mean carrying the weight of the world, he would tell trainees. It means being part of a network of people who care. His grandmother's wisdom became an official part of the curriculum. Her simple sayings about community responsibility and human connection resonated with people in a way that formal training sometimes couldn't. She began recording short video segments called Grandma's Guardian Tips that went viral on social media. The drive-through window remained his favorite place to work. Every car that pulls up is a story, he would tell new employees during training. Our job is to be present enough to read those stories and brave enough to act when something doesn't feel right. Local businesses started implementing what they called guardian hours, designated times when trained staff would be particularly vigilant for signs of distress. These hours were quietly advertised through community networks, creating safe windows of opportunity for people seeking help. The impact on law enforcement was significant. Officer Patel, now promoted to lieutenant, reported that tips from trained service workers had become one of their most reliable sources of information about criminal activities. The partnership between police and community members had never been stronger. Big Shaq's own family grew stronger through the experience too. His siblings, once skeptical of his decision to keep working at McDonald's while holding a social work degree, now understood that his position was about more than serving food, it was about serving his community. During a Community Safety Awareness Month, the mayor presented Big Shaq with a key to the city. In his acceptance speech, he shared a story about a recent incident where a new employee had prevented a potential kidnapping just 2 weeks after completing the training program. Success isn't measured by the number of programs we create or the awards we receive, he told the audience. It's measured by the stories we never hear about, the tragedies that don't happen because someone was paying attention at the right moment. The training program's impact extended beyond crime prevention. Participants reported feeling more connected to their communities, more confident in their abilities, and more aware of their potential to make a difference. The simple act of being present had created a ripple effect of positive change. Every interaction is an opportunity, became Big Shaq's mantra. Every moment contains the potential for transformation. We just have to be present enough to recognize it and brave enough to act on it. 2.5 years after that fateful night, Big Shaq's story took an unexpected turn when a small group of international students visited his McDonald's. They had traveled from Japan to study successful community safety programs in America, and his training model had caught their attention. The students spent a week observing the daily operations, taking notes on everything from the color-coded cup system to the subtle ways the staff communicated with each other. What impressed them most was how natural it all seemed. The awareness wasn't forced or suspicious, but rather a fluid part of everyday service. One of the students, a young woman named Yuki, shared how she'd been developing a similar program for convenience stores in Tokyo. In Japan, we have a concept called Kodomo 110 Ban, safe houses for children in trouble, she explained. But your program shows how every business can become a safe space. The international interest sparked a new phase in the program's evolution. Big Shaq began working with translators to adapt the training materials for different cultures and contexts. The core message of awareness and community responsibility remained the same, but the delivery was customized to respect local customs and norms. During this time, he received news that touched his heart deeply. Detective Chun visited to share that the little girl from that night had started a school project teaching basic sign language to her classmates. She'd told her teacher, if everyone knows how to ask for help in different ways, nobody has to feel alone. The project had spread to other schools in the district, creating a generation of children who understood the importance of multiple communication methods. More importantly, it fostered an environment where asking for help was seen as an act of strength rather than weakness. Big Shaq's grandmother, now a beloved figure in the community safety movement, started hosting weekly wisdom circles at the local community center. People would gather to share stories, discuss concerns, and learn from her lifetime of experience in reading people and situations. "The eyes see what the heart knows to look for," she would often say, serving her famous sweet tea to participants. Her simple but profound insights became the foundation for a new aspect of the training program focused on emotional intelligence and intuitive awareness. The documentary, Present and Aware, had caught the attention of education officials, who began incorporating its lessons into school curricula. Students learned about community safety alongside traditional subjects, understanding that citizenship meant more than following rules, it meant being actively present for others. One rainy evening, a truck driver pulled up to the drive-through window. He wasn't there to order food, but to share how the training program had helped him identify and report a trafficking operation at a rest stop. "I used to mind my own business," he said, "but now I understand that safety is everybody's business." His story highlighted an important evolution in the program. It wasn't just about preventing immediate crimes, it was about creating a culture of awareness that made it harder for criminal activities to take root in communities. The success of the program led to an unexpected partnership with a tech company. They developed a secure app that helped trained community guardians communicate with each other and law enforcement while protecting everyone's privacy. The app became a valuable tool for coordinating community safety efforts. Big Shaq's original training manual had grown into a comprehensive curriculum that was being taught in community colleges. Students could now earn certificates in community safety awareness, adding professional credentials to their natural instincts for helping others. The drive-through window where it all started had become a symbol of hope and community resilience. People would sometimes drive by just to wave or share a quick word of encouragement. Each interaction reinforced the idea that everyone had a role to play in keeping their community safe. Local businesses began incorporating safety awareness into their hiring processes, recognizing that alert and engaged employees were an asset to both their business and the community. The training program became a valuable addition to resumes, opening new career opportunities for participants. During a community safety forum, a retired police chief shared an interesting observation. In areas where the program had been implemented, they saw not only a decrease in major crimes but also an increase in community engagement. People were more likely to participate in neighborhood events, volunteer for local causes, and look out for each other. The program's success inspired similar initiatives in other service industries. Hair salons, taxi services, and cleaning companies developed their own versions of the training, each adapted to their unique contexts but maintaining the core principle of aware and compassionate service. Big Shaq's approach to training evolved as well. He began incorporating role-playing exercises that helped participants understand both sides of intervention, how to offer help and how to ask for it. This dual perspective made the training more effective and empathetic. One particular success story stood out. A hotel housekeeper who had completed the training noticed signs of distress in a young guest. Her careful intervention led to the discovery of a college student who had fallen victim to an online scam and was being extorted. The housekeeper's awareness had prevented the situation from escalating into something much worse. As the program grew, Big Shaq never forgot its origins in a simple moment of paying attention. He kept a framed photo of the McDonald's drive-through window in his office, a reminder that extraordinary change can come from ordinary places. The impact on young people was particularly meaningful. High school students started community safety clubs, organizing workshops and awareness campaigns. They brought fresh perspectives to the program, especially regarding social media and online safety. "The next generation gets it," Big Shaq would say during training sessions. "They understand that being connected means more than just having followers, it means being truly present for each other." 3 years after the incident that changed everything, Big Shaq found himself sitting in a university lecture hall, not as a student, but as a guest lecturer for a course on community intervention and social responsibility. Looking out at the sea of eager faces, he remembered his own journey and how a single moment of awareness had sparked a movement. The lecture hall was packed with students from various disciplines: social work, criminal justice, business management, and even architecture. They were there to learn how simple awareness could be integrated into their future professions. Big Shaq had never imagined his experience would become part of academic curriculum. During the Q&A session, a student asked a question that made him pause. How do you handle the emotional weight of knowing there might be people you missed before you started the program? Big Shaq took a deep breath before answering. That's something I struggled with for a long time, he admitted. But I learned that we can't change the past, we can only use it to shape a better future. Every person we help now creates a ripple effect that touches countless lives. His honesty resonated with the students, leading to a deeper discussion about mental health support for community guardians. This conversation inspired a new addition to the training program, regular support group sessions where participants could share their experiences and process their emotions. Back at McDonald's, the drive-through window had become more than just a service point. It was a listening post, a safe haven, and a symbol of community vigilance. Regular customers would often share updates about suspicious activities they'd noticed or people they'd helped, creating an informal neighborhood watch network. One evening, a woman pulled up to the window in tears. She wasn't there to order food but to share her story. She'd been in an abusive relationship and had noticed the "safe space" sticker on the restaurant window. The sight of it had given her the courage to finally seek help. She was now volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, using her experience to help others. The training program had evolved to include specialized modules for different scenarios. There was one for identifying signs of elder abuse, another for recognizing domestic violence, and even one focused on helping homeless youth. Each module was developed in collaboration with experts and survivors. Big Shaq's grandmother's wisdom continued to influence the program's development. She had started recording weekly podcasts called Street Smart Wisdom, where she shared stories from her life and lessons about reading people and situations. Her folksy charm and practical insights made complex safety concepts accessible to everyone. The international impact of the program continued to grow. A group of Australian fast food workers had adapted the training for their unique context, incorporating awareness of bush fire evacuation and water safety. In Brazil, the program had been modified to address the specific challenges faced by favela communities. Local businesses had started what they called Guardian Nights, evening events where trained staff would be particularly vigilant and available to help anyone in distress. These events weren't publicly advertised but were known through community networks as safe times for people to seek assistance. The technology component of the program expanded as well. The safety app now included features like silent alerts, resource directories, and real-time translation. It had become a vital tool for connecting community guardians across different locations and languages. During a community safety workshop, Big Shaq received unexpected news. The little girl from that night, now 8 years old, had won a National Youth Leadership Award for her work teaching sign language and safety awareness to other children. Her mother shared the news through Detective Chen, along with a new drawing, this time of a community filled with helping hands. The impact on law enforcement continued to evolve. Police departments across the country were reporting increased cooperation from community members and better outcomes in investigations. Officer Patel, now a captain, often cited the program as a model for community-oriented policing. It's not just about catching criminals, she explained during a joint training session. It's about creating an environment where crime becomes harder to commit because everyone is paying attention and looking out for each other. The documentary, Present and Aware, had inspired a series of shorter films focusing on specific aspects of community safety. These mini-documentaries were being used in schools, businesses, and community organizations to train people on various aspects of awareness and intervention. Big Shaq's approach to training remained hands-on and personal, despite the program's growth. He insisted on spending time with each new group of trainees, sharing not just the technical aspects of awareness but the human element as well. The heart of this program, he would say, is not in the protocols but in the people. The drive-through window had become a sort of pilgrimage site for community safety advocates. People would travel from different states just to meet Big Shaq and see where the movement began. He always reminded visitors that any place could become a point of transformation, it just took someone willing to pay attention. Local schools had integrated aspects of the program into their curriculum, teaching children about community safety in age-appropriate ways. The lessons weren't about fear but about empowerment, showing young people how they could make a difference in their communities. One of the most significant developments was the creation of a scholarship program for service industry workers who wanted to pursue degrees in social work or criminal justice. The fund was supported by businesses that had benefited from the training program, creating a cycle of community investment. The impact on individual lives continued to amaze Big Shaq. A young barista who had completed the training noticed signs of human trafficking at her coffee shop and successfully intervened. Her story became part of the training materials, showing how awareness could make a difference in any setting. Every person has the potential to be a guardian, Big Shaq would tell trainees. It's not about being a hero, it's about being present, being aware, and being willing to act when something doesn't feel right. 5 years had passed since that pivotal night at the McDonald's drive-through window. Big Shaq stood in front of his old workplace, now adorned with a small plaque commemorating the event that had sparked a worldwide movement in community awareness. The restaurant had become more than just a fast food establishment, it was a living testament to the power of being present and aware. On this particular morning, something special was happening. The restaurant was hosting a reunion of sorts, bringing together people whose lives had been touched by the awareness program over the years. The parking lot was filled with familiar faces, each carrying their own story of how a moment of attention had made a difference. Detective Chen, now the head of a specialized community safety unit, arrived early with a surprise guest, the little girl's mother. She carried a sealed envelope, explaining that her daughter, now 10 years old, had written something she wanted shared with everyone who had been part of the journey. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter that brought tears to many eyes. "Dear Mr. Big Shaq and all the guardians," it began, "thank you for teaching the world that sometimes the quietest voices need the loudest help. Because of you, I never feel alone anymore, and I know other kids don't have to feel alone either." The letter was accompanied by a drawing of a chain of people holding hands, stretching across the page. At the bottom, she had written in careful letters, "We are all connected by the choice to care." The reunion brought together an incredible mix of people: fast food workers who had prevented crimes, teachers who had implemented safety programs in their schools, business owners who had transformed their establishments into safe spaces, and law enforcement officers who had seen their communities transform. Officer Patel, now police commissioner, shared statistics that showed the program's impact. In areas where the Community Guardian program had been fully implemented, there had been a significant decrease in crimes against vulnerable populations. But more importantly, there had been an increase in what she called preventive interventions, situations where awareness had stopped crimes before they could occur. Big Shaq's grandmother, now in her 80s but still sharp as ever, held court at her usual booth, sharing wisdom with a new generation of community guardians. "The eyes are useless when the heart is blind," she reminded them, her voice carrying the weight of years of observation and understanding. The training program had evolved into something far beyond its original scope. Universities across the country now offered certified courses in community safety awareness, combining practical skills with theoretical understanding of social dynamics and intervention strategies. Big Shaq's experience had become a case study in how individual action could catalyze social change. During the reunion, stories were shared that had never been told before. A truck driver revealed how the program had helped him create a network of aware and vigilant drivers across the country's highways. A flight attendant described how the training had been adapted for airline crews, leading to several successful interventions during international flights. The technology that had grown alongside the program had evolved too. The safety app now included features for international coordination, real-time translation, and secure communication channels for community guardians worldwide. It had become an essential tool in the global fight against human trafficking and exploitation. Local businesses shared how the program had changed their corporate culture. What started as safety training had blossomed into a broader commitment to community welfare. Companies now evaluated their success not just by profits, but by their impact on community safety and well-being. The documentary filmmaker who had created Present and Aware was there too, capturing moments for a 5-year anniversary special. The original documentary had inspired similar projects worldwide, each telling stories of how ordinary people in everyday situations had become extraordinary guardians of their communities. Big Shaq's own journey had come full circle. While he had opportunities to move on to bigger positions, he chose to remain connected to his roots. He still worked shifts at the drive-thru window, believing that the best way to teach awareness was to practice it daily. The reunion included a special ceremony where new initiatives were announced. A foundation had been established to provide resources for community safety programs worldwide. The first project would be building a training center that would serve as both a teaching facility and a memorial to all the lives touched by the movement. Young people who had grown up with the program shared their perspectives. Many had chosen careers in social services, law enforcement, or community development, inspired by the example set by Big Shaq and others. They represented the next generation of community guardians, bringing fresh ideas and approaches to the mission. During the ceremony, Big Shaq shared something he'd never revealed before. "Every morning before my shift," he said, "I look in the mirror and make a promise to be present, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. Because you never know which moment might be the one that changes someone's life." The impact of that one night had created ripples that continued to spread. Schools in different countries had incorporated awareness training into their curriculum. Businesses had reformed their practices to prioritize community safety. Law enforcement agencies had transformed their approach to community engagement. But perhaps the most significant change was in how people viewed their role in society. The program had shown that everyone, regardless of their position, had the power to make a difference. It had transformed the concept of community safety from a responsibility of the few to a commitment of the many. As the reunion drew to a close, Big Shaq stood once again at his drive-thru window. A young worker asked him if he ever got tired of telling the story. He smiled and shook his head. "Each time I tell it," he said, "I'm reminded that every interaction is an opportunity, every moment holds potential, and every person has the power to change a life." The legacy of that night lived on not just in programs and protocols, but in the countless small moments of awareness that happened every day, in restaurants, schools, businesses, and communities around the world. It was a reminder that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest choices, and that being present in a moment could ripple out to touch countless lives. "We're all guardians," Big Shaq would say, "not because we're special, but because we choose to pay attention. And in that attention lies the power to change the world, one moment at a time."